Well, joining me now in the studio is our international affairs analyst and former Europe and Middle East editor at the Associated Press, Dan Perry, and security analyst and host of the Ross Handler Report, Yakov Lapin. So welcome to you both. We have a lot to cover here right now. You know, Trump is now choosing between a 2-week campaign to destroy Iran's missile capabilities, at least that's what he says, or a limited strike that preserves space for diplomacy. Dan, I want to turn to you right now and ask you what you think is more likely to happen and which of those options makes strategic sense in Trump's world right now.
Trump presumably doesn't want a full return to the war, so something temporary and limited makes sense for him politically. Strategically, the two levers Iran has on the world, despite having been battered very badly militarily, are the missiles and the choke point on the Strait of Hormuz. If indeed he chooses a 2-week plan that really can take out the missiles, then that is strategically incredibly significant. And I wouldn't be terribly surprised to see that coupled with, let's say, an attempt to seize Qasem Island, which is in fact the Iranian land that controls the choke point, and it is conveniently separated by some water from the mainland of Iran. These two moves would certainly be strategic and would alter the equation that has enabled Iran to act like a victor, even though by any conventional measure, it was a loser.
We see the international community saying that this war needs to end. There are mediators, Pakistan, Oman, now Egypt saying that they want to step up. Nobody is really able to make any change on the ground. And now we're hearing about reports of Gulf states potentially getting involved. Is there a world we could see in which more nations do join in with the United States to attack the Islamic Republic of Iran?
That would be the best of all worlds, or at least the best of all potentially available worlds. It would require Trump to make amends with NATO and with the Europeans, something he's not seemingly inclined to do, nor is it obviously in his character, but it would be helpful. It would be helpful to have the Arab nations formally on side. So what you just mentioned is a step in that direction for sure. It would be helpful to have India on side. It would be helpful to have China agree to not interfere. In other words, to make it a near total international coalition. That probably has some value, but even then, I fear that Yakov is right, and jihadists are not persuadable of anything. And therefore, I've been saying for a while that you basically have 4 options: capitulation, continued war of attrition, a war to the finish, which is not what we saw in February through April, or a complete hermetic land, air, and sea blockade, but really this time meant to smoke them out. And if you do any of the permanent solution scenarios, you have to make sure that the global public and markets understand that there's going to be a limited period of economic pain. There's almost no way around it without capitulation. I agree with Yakov. All the in-between scenarios are going to include the economic pain and reach no positive outcome because the Iranians are not persuadable. And to the previous point about whether it's possible for the Americans to actually get rid of all the missiles, I agree with you that we have a credibility problem because the Americans and the Israelis repeatedly announced greater degrees of success on the nukes and on the missiles than is apparent from the current narrative that says they still have 2,000 rockets, ballistic missiles. Who knows, maybe the West is running out of interceptors. That runs counter to what we heard. And of course, the very existence of the phase 2 of the war that began this year runs counter to Trump's claims that everything had been obliterated a year ago.
All right, well, we're going to be turning to the Gaza Strip now. There have been a bunch of, you could say, very confusing headlines within the last couple of hours. Israel has just projected a 15-point Gaza roadmap and made its position crystal clear in that process. An Israeli official says Jerusalem has conveyed its reservations about the proposed plan to Tony Blair's envoy team, insisting there will be no Israeli withdrawal from the yellow line in Gaza, the current ceasefire boundary, until Hamas is completely disarmed, all weapons removed from the Strip, and Gaza is fully demilitarized. And here's what is particularly striking. The same official says Gaza didn't even come up in Netanyahu's meeting with Trump in Washington this week. 2 leaders who supposedly share a vision for Gaza's future. And the topic apparently didn't make the agenda. This all comes after reports earlier today that Hamas appeared to have accepted complete disarmament as part of an emerging agreement on the next phase of the Gaza deal. We're going to turn back to our guests in the studio on all of this. Yakov, I want to turn to you. You know, Israel is demanding complete Hamas disarmament as a precondition for any withdrawal. This is apparently what they had agreed to in that initial ceasefire deal. hasn't happened until now. But obviously, we do know that Netanyahu has Israeli elections coming up, in October. There's certainly domestic concerns when it comes to dealing with what happens in Gaza. The question is, how much does Trump care about seeing this ceasefire through?
I can't read his mind, but I think as long as things are relatively quiet, he doesn't much care. And he wants no distraction from the main prize, which is some elegant ending of the situation. In the Persian Gulf, is the official speaking the truth? Did it really not come up? If it came up, would that really matter? Are they really going to decide something in that one meeting that is largely theatrics anyway? I'm not a big fan of overestimating the importance of these meetings. If Israel had real intelligence, for example, about Iran, I would have expected Israel to hand it over immediately, not wait for a meeting and embarrass Trump by making it look like Netanyahu was arriving with intelligence Trump lacked. So the meeting is the meeting. As for Gaza, I completely agree with Yaakov. There is absolutely no reason for Israel to withdraw 1 millimeter until Hamas disarms. That is the sine qua non. That is the be-all and end-all. Without that happening, much as is the case with Hezbollah in Lebanon, nothing good will occur in Gaza. So it is somewhat useful that the world community seems to implicitly be doing what I think most of us here in the studio recommended from the beginning, which is that other than humanitarian aid, no reconstruction begin until Hamas disarms. Improbable though Hamas disarming might be, much as I might agree with Yaakov that Hamas will voluntarily not do that no matter what because their ideology is jihadist, they are not. They still live in a physical universe where there's pressure. And we need pressure to mount on Hamas. And there's two levers for that, for bringing such pressure to bear. One is Israel's control of the perimeter in Gaza. And the other is the beginning of the reconstruction. Israel should steadfastly stick to this. Any pressure on Israel to somehow agree to begin implementing its part of the bargain without Hamas implementing its part of the bargain, which is, in fact, a critical one. Theoretically, Hamas agreed to disarm as part of the 20-point plan. Trump should not back away from this one iota because Trump claimed that Hamas agreed. And he looks foolish if, almost a year later, it looks like he'd been lied to or that it wasn't true.
All right. Well, we're going to be, quick comments.
There is something that Israel can do in this in-between period, this limbo period, which is something that's been talked about, which is start building temporary housing on the Israeli side of the Gaza Strip and start luring Gazans away from the Hamas part, because Hamas without Gazan civilians turns into a guerrilla terror group without much influence.
And by the way, what's relevant is in that regard is that there is a plan to maybe bring in a temporary authority to Rafah. And Israel agreeing to that plan had been presented as some big concession, and it shouldn't be. Israel should be eager to agree to any progress in areas that are not controlled by Hamas, precisely for the reason Yaakov said.
Our international affairs analyst, Dan Perry, what do you make of this visit? What was accomplished, if anything?
Well, he did show that he still has supporters in the Republican Party and in the administration. And he might have convinced some voters back in Israel that all is not as bad as it seems. But I think he is deluding himself, if not the voters and the viewers, if he thinks that the only problem Israel has is bot farms in sovereign countries. It's more than just an image problem, a propaganda campaign. Surely it's that, and it's also anti-Semitism. But on top of all of that, there's Israel's policies, the outcome of the war, the tremendous destruction in Gaza that Israel seems indifferent to. So it's a complicated picture that won't be resolved with propaganda and with sound bites.
I'd like to turn now to our international affairs analyst, Dan Perry, with us in studio. How seriously should we take this movement? Obviously, this is a fringe group. It is a small group, but certainly a vocal one at that.
Look, if I was Iran, I would pay a bunch of agents in Israel or traitors or fools to do this and to validate, in so doing, the concerns around the world that I actually hear wherever I go, that Israel is expansionist and seeks to take over whatever territory it can in Syria and Lebanon. And by the way, these are two countries, especially Lebanon, with which Israel dreams one day of having a peace treaty, or at least a defense treaty.
Right.
It's completely absurd. It causes incredible damage. The government doesn't encourage it, but certain ministers in the government passively do, maybe even not that passive. And they're not having the book thrown at them. Any Israeli illegally in Syria, or Lebanon maybe, needs to be immediately rounded up, put on a truck, returned to Israel, and prosecuted with the full force of the law. That's about what I can say.
Right.
And if the current coalition is reelected on October 27th, I fear we will be hearing more and more of this, not as government policy, but as maniacal zealotry that the government looks the other way with, or maybe here and there enables, and it's nothing but damage. It is a net loss for the state of Israel in every conceivable way, including if, God forbid, Israel seeks to take over these territories. You have another demographic problem because they're full of Syrians. And whatever became of the idea of Israel as a Jewish democratic state.
I mean, it's just so damaging to see these images. Obviously, you know, even if you and I know that this is a small fringe extremist group, the images are obviously going viral already.
It's handing propaganda to the enemy.
It's absolutely terrible. All right, Dan, I'd like to thank you so much for breaking that down for us. We're going to be turning now to our international affairs analyst, Dan Perry, for more on this. You know, first of all, I want you to kind of break down to our viewers why the Houthis and Iran are so able, or you could say so able to successfully and effectively take control of these major shipping lanes when, you know, they're up against an empire like the United States. What is going on here?
Because you're talking about a waterway that is 20, 30 miles wide in either case, and it's easy to lob missiles and fire drones and even throw rocks at these ships. And the minute the ships are in danger, instantly the insurance premiums go up 20 times, reasonably enough, and it instantly becomes uneconomical. And of course, then you seek alternatives like pipelines or going around the Cape of Good Hope and circumventing all of Africa because it's just not practical. Now, it's very easy to fire drones or throw stones, and that's why. They can easily do it, even if their entire navy, in Iran's case, had been sunk the way Trump claimed. You don't need a navy, you just need $20,000 drones. So they have to be compelled not to do it. If they cannot be compelled not to do it, and it looks likely to be the case because jihadis can't be compelled to do anything, then you have to destroy them. And destroying them is very difficult, not just in the case of the Iranian regime. Iran is a huge country, almost the size of mainland Western Europe, almost the same population, half. But in the case of the Houthis, so you see here Saudi Arabia. Obviously, they have a huge interest in having the Red Sea be open. Not just Saudi Arabia. The immediate partner they might have is Egypt, that has a huge, huge interest in having these ships go up to the Suez Canal, where they lost, by recent estimates, $6 billion a year in hard currency coming in because of the Houthis in 2024. But Saudi Arabia already fought the Houthis. They can't be surprised by this. They knew this madness was coming, because already in 2014, 2015, they were preparing to fight the Houthis, and for almost a decade, they tried and failed. And they found themselves under fire from their oil fields under fire, and the shipping impeded, and all kinds of instability threatened. And it comes down to this. Saudi Arabia does not want to march into Yemen and seize Sana'a and seize the port of Hodeidah, and also go into the mountains and valleys and go to the tribal regions from which the Houthis come. No one wants to do this. Same exact thing, quite analogous to the fact that the solution in Iran is to destroy the regime. But to do it with firepower alone, without boots on the ground, is very, very difficult. The Houthis and Iranians both have no end to chutzpah. They're unbelievably brazen because they don't care, or at least to make a good show of not caring, about having their people suffer or even themselves being killed. In aid of this project. Something's got to give, and I fear in the end. And again, I have to plead my previous moderate positions. I'm not a warmonger, but I think it's going to have to require in the end an invasion of Yemen.